At 79, the tragedy of Reggie Jackson is beyond heartbreaking. Under the gloomy sky of an empty Yankee Stadium, the bronze statue of Reggie Jackson stands silently in the light rain, as if still waiting for the echoes of Reggie, from the past. He was the legend of October, the man who turned the tensest moments into immortality. 563 home runs, a number etched in history. 14 All-Star appearances, 2 World Series MVP titles, 5 World Championships, a 1973 League MVP award, and an unforgettable evening, Game 6 in 1977, when he hit 3 consecutive home runs, sending tens of thousands of Yankees fans into a frenzy of awe. He was the soul of the Bronx, a symbol of strength and pride for Black Americans, proving that the greatest light sometimes comes from those doubted the most. They called him Mr. October, the man who made America's heart beat faster every time October returned, a warrior in an era when baseball was a religion, and he was the saint wielding a wooden bat to work miracles. But that light is now just a faint streak on an aged face. The hands that once gripped that bat tremble every morning. Each breath is a small battle between memory and body. His back aches, his eyes blur, old wounds gnaw at him every night. In a lonely Malibu home, he does physical therapy alone, sweat mixing with tears, yet still resolute, because he has never known how to surrender. His trembling fingers still leaf through old photos, the Yankees jersey, the A's cap, a young face glowing under the lights. He smiles faintly, then falls silent. He once made all of America chant his name, but today, there's only the sound of waves crashing and faint breaths, proof that behind glory, there are pains only survivors understand. Wyncote, Pennsylvania, the 1950s, a quiet small town, streets lined with golden maples, but beneath that gentle gold were invisible boundaries, where a black boy felt out of place in an all-white neighborhood, like a smear of ink on a freshly painted wall. That boy was Reginald Martinez Jackson. Every morning on his way to school, he crossed through curious neighbors' stares, heard whispers behind his back, then ran as fast as he could, hoping to reach the ball field, where at least people cared only about the flight of the ball, not the color of the thrower's skin. But even there, loneliness clung to him. His father, Martinez Jackson, a former Negro Leagues baseball player, was a stern man who rarely smiled, teaching his son to be strong, to excel, to never let anyone pity him. His mother, Clara, was gentle but distant, always weary in the days after her divorce. Reggie grew up between 2 dim lights, one cold, one silent, with no one to teach him how to say, "I miss you, Dad," or "I love you, Mom." He only learned to hide his emotions, swallowing tears as a survival habit. One afternoon at school, while playing basketball, Reggie leaped for a ball and crashed hard onto the wooden floor. A sharp crack echoed. The court fell silent. His neck was broken in multiple places. The doctor said bluntly, "You may never walk normally again." That night he lay still in the hospital, neck braced in metal, staring at the white ceiling blurred by fluorescent light. From the hallway came the sound of his mother's heels, then her stifled sobs, soft prayers trembling like fragile threads, holding on to hope. It was the first, and perhaps only, time Reggie heard his mother's voice shake with fear of losing him. He survived, miraculously. But his soul was different. The boy who woke up was no longer the one from yesterday. Reggie learned that love sometimes only comes when you're on the brink of death. And so in silence, a vow was born. If love wouldn't come to him, he'd make the whole world see him. From then on, baseball wasn't just a game, it was a battlefield, the only place he could win, the only place he could be named. His teenage years passed amid games and the scornful glares of others. While friends were picked up by parents, Reggie pedaled home alone down long, endless roads. Many nights, he looked through windows, saw warmly lit homes, heard laughter, while his own house had only a lonely hallway bulb. That's when his heart grew steely, a resolve mixed with sorrow, like a sharp blade in the hands of someone once wounded. At 18, Reggie left Wyncote, carrying an old glove and a scar on his neck, to Arizona State University, a strange sun-scorched land. There he was one of the few black players on the team. Sometimes crowds jeered, threw bottles as he stepped onto the field. Some restaurants refused to serve him. Each time he only gripped his glove tighter, swung harder, and when his hit soared, he wasn't just hitting the ball, he was striking the contempt hanging over him. But victory, however glorious, couldn't erase the loneliness. At an age when peers dreamed of the future, Reggie only ran back to his dorm, wiped sweat, looked at his calloused hands, and thought, this is the only thing that's mine. Then he met Jenny Campos, a Mexican-American girl with eyes warm as afternoon sunlight. They talked about music, dreams, and for the first time, Reggie felt heard. Jenny saw not the athlete, but a young man learning to believe in love. They married young, two souls finding each other in solitude. But that light was fleeting. As Reggie entered the professional world, schedules, pressure, and newfound fame pulled them apart. In 1973, the marriage dissolved, leaving a void in him that would never be filled. Years later, as a star, he kept a quiet habit of gazing west at sunset, toward Arizona, where the first days of ambition and loss were buried. He left Arizona carrying an unhealed wound, a fear of never being enough, a longing to be loved, but not knowing how to hold on to it. And that fear, later, became the fiercest fuel for the legend named Reggie Jackson. In the summer of 1967, Reggie Jackson donned the green and gold uniform of the Kansas City Athletics. The 21-year-old stood quietly at the practice field, sunlight spilling over his shoulders, while the noise of the stands seemed to belong to another world. He started on the bench, seen as a kid full of muscle but raw, someone who swung like a storm but could crumble easily. In the locker room, some white teammates avoided him, others tossed casual jabs. I couldn't eat at the same table, they told me to eat alone. Reggie later recalled in a low, choked voice, but I didn't leave, because if I ran, they'd win. Every swing was his retort. Reggie hit as if tearing apart the invisible limits encircling his life. In 1969, he smashed 47 home runs, leading the league, forcing crowds that once booed to stand and clap. But behind the applause was an unshakable solitude. He left the field, returned to an empty apartment, turned on the TV just to hear the crowd's roar, the only sound that made him feel he existed. Then in 1972, the A's began a historic run. 3 straight seasons, the Oakland team dominated the World Series, and Reggie was the brightest torch in October. In 1973, he was named MVP, a symbol of strength, speed and pride. When asked how it felt to be the only black star among them, he just smiled, hiding the bitterness. I don't hit to be a black hero, I hit so people see me as a man. October in Oakland smelled of gunpowder and endless cheers. He learned the sweetest revenge wasn't in words, but in hits so far the crowd lost sight of the ball. Yet that same blazing light began to melt his heart. The more he won, the more he was surrounded by expectations, envy, and loneliness. Behind every championship night was an empty one in a hotel room, where he shed his number 9 jersey, looked in the mirror, and wondered, does anyone really see me? In 1977, he joined the New York Yankees, where the lights were brighter, the media fiercer, and glory more ruthless. The press called him arrogant, teammates were wary, Bronx fans initially jeered. But Reggie was used to being the outcast. He just smiled, gripped his Louisville Slugger tighter, and waited for October. Then came that fateful night, October 18, 1977, Game 6 of the World Series against the Dodgers. Yankee Stadium stands were taut as a wire, 56,000 people holding their breath. Reggie stepped up, lights blazing on his face. For the first time, he didn't hear the crowd, only his heartbeat and memories of exclusion. The first pitch came, crack. The ball soared over 400 feet, vanishing into the New York night. The chant Reggie, Reggie began to thunder. The second pitch crack. Another home run, straight into the center stands. Fans went wild, teammates stunned. The third pitch crack. The ball arced into the sky, fireworks bursting over the Bronx. He rounded the bases, head slightly bowed. No smile, no shouts. Beneath his feet, the world was ablaze. They called it the Night of Myth. The press crowned him Mr. October. American headlines wrote that one man made a nation forget its divisions. But in that moment, as lights flashed on his face, Reggie felt empty. As the crowd roared his name, it was as if they were calling someone else, a symbol, not the real man. That night, he returned to his hotel alone. He set his bat on the table, turned off the TV and let the rain tap against the window. He remembered the boy in Wincote, his mother praying in the hospital, the days no one would sit with him. He had made all of America look up, but he felt his heart sinking. That October wrote his name in history, but stole what remained of his peace. The Yankee Stadium lights were dazzling but too fierce, burning away even his private shadows. The man rejected for his skin made a nation look up, but in that moment, he began to lose himself. Fame in New York is a double-edged sword, gleaming brightly but sharp enough to cut deep into the heart. After the legendary night of 1977, Reggie Jackson became the brightest star in baseball's sky, but also the most scrutinized name in the room, nicknamed the Bronx Zoo. The Yankees back then were like a chaotic beehive, where every ego was massive, every victory came with arguments, and every loss needed a scapegoat. Reggie, with his blunt confidence and distinctiveness, became the perfect target. He didn't hide his emotions, didn't pretend when treated unfairly, and that made many resent him. Teammates were cold, the media hounded him daily, digging into every detail of his personal life. They called him arrogant, divisive. No one understood that behind his cool exterior was a man who lived on pride alone. It was the only way to avoid being swallowed whole. Then one summer night in 1980, that resentment nearly turned tragic. The game had just ended, and he was driving his black Mercedes back to his Upper East Side apartment. At a red light, a car beside him rolled down its window. Someone shouted something, and a glass bottle smashed into his car door, shattering. Reggie jolted upright on instinct, but then 3 blasts tore through the air. Bang, bang, bang. 3 bullets whizzed past his face, piercing the windshield, glass shards flying across him. He remembered the sharp smell of gunpowder, the mix of metal and smoke in the thick air. When it was over, he sat frozen in the car, hands trembling uncontrollably, blood dripping from a cut on his cheek. "I thought, I'm done," he later recalled. "Not my career, but my life. I'd run too far, and fate was catching up." After the shooting, he avoided the press, skipped parties. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done with him. Years earlier, in 1976, his Oakland home had gone up in flames. The fire devoured his championship rings, his 1973 MVP trophy, family photos. He returned to find only smoke and ash, the smell of burnt wood clinging to his clothes for months. Everything I was proud of, thought I'd keep forever, turned to dust in one night. He gave a bitter laugh, recalling it. Yet fire seemed to love him, or rather, it liked to test him. In 1988, his car collection warehouse in California burned down. Over 20 vintage cars, Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, Shelby Mustang, reduced to twisted metal frames. When the firefighters put out the blaze, Reggie walked into the blackened wreckage, picked up a charred RAR logo, his hands shaking, eyes fixed on the heap of steel that was once his pride. "I won so many games, but I couldn't keep anything." 3 years later, in 1991, the Oakland Hills firestorm razed the neighborhood where he once lived. Reggie stood at a distance, watching a black column of smoke coil upward, like a giant snake, licking away the last of his keepsakes. A friend recounted that when they saw him the next day, Reggie said only 2 sentences: "I've lived in fire before. It just came back to remind me, nothing is mine forever." 3 fires, 1 shooting. Fate seemed to rewrite his life in ash and gunpowder. He kept himself busy, hiding behind confidence, but each night in his quiet apartment, he heard the gunshots in his head, smelled smoke in his throat. Some nights, he dreamed of his parents standing in flames, while he couldn't run fast enough. He woke drenched in sweat, heart racing like it did on the field. But unlike then, no crowd cheered, no lights shone on that face anymore. Friends grew scarce. Some said he was too hard to approach, others couldn't handle his silence. Women came and went like fleeting breezes. Reggie was left with work, the gym, and long evenings with no calls. In his rebuilt home, he hung an old photo on the wall, him younger, in a Yankees jersey, standing on the field, bat raised like a victor. Below it a small plaque he carved himself: everything can burn. When sunset spilled through the window, bathing the room in red, Reggie sat with a glass of whiskey, eyes distant. Once a reporter asked what he feared most, and he answered slowly, "I fear silence. It rings like a bat hitting a ball, except no one claps afterward." The words left listeners choked. Once a symbol of strength and iron will, deep down, Reggie Jackson was just a man who'd passed through too much fire to believe victory could soothe loneliness. Fire took everything, from possessions to memories, leaving him bare. He stood amid the ashes of his old home, trophies, rings, photos, all charred fragments. He picked up a warped piece of metal, burn marks staining his fingers, and whispered, "I won so many games, but I couldn't keep anything." That night, in the dark, he sat by the fireplace, its small flames flickering in his weary eyes. The light cast shadows on the face that once set stadiums ablaze, now quiet, as if his whole life was a fire that never died, just changed color, from the golden blaze of victory to the fading red of solitude. And in that firelight, you could still see Reggie Jackson, not the Mr. October of home runs, but the man who survived what should have burned everything. The 1990s came to Reggie Jackson in the silence of loss. After years of chasing glory, he entered the new decade no longer an athlete, but a middle-aged man learning to face emptiness. Baseball, the reason he woke each morning, was now a distant echo. His father, Martinez Jackson, who taught him to stand tall even when the world turned away, passed quietly. Reggie was on the other side of the country, unable to return for a final goodbye. News of his father's death came at midnight. He sat motionless for hours in a hotel room, the phone screen still lit. His heart darkened. "I wish he'd seen me in Cooperstown," Reggie said, voice catching in his chest. "I wish I could have told him I made it." But life doesn't give chances for last words. His mother passed soon after, taking the last piece of his childhood he'd tucked away in his heart. When he heard, he said only one thing to a close friend: "Now I'm truly alone." And it was true, no family left to call, no home to return to after each season. In 1993, he was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame on his first ballot, with 93.6% of the vote, near unanimous. Cooperstown that day was bathed in sunlight, thousands of fans crowding the barriers, holding signs reading "Mr. October Forever." As he stepped to the podium in a navy suit and silver tie, smiling like in his winning years, something heavy lingered in his eyes. Below, the front row had an empty seat, where his father should have been. He stared at it for a long time. Amid roaring applause, he took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "If my father were alive, he might not say anything, but I know this time he'd be proud." The crowd fell silent for a moment. They saw a different Reggie Jackson, not the arrogant star, not the October legend, but a son finally finding a way to say love to his father, late but sincere. When the ceremony ended, fans dispersed, lights dimmed, and he stayed behind, alone on a bench. He didn't want to leave. In that moment, Cooperstown wasn't a place of honor, but a graveyard of memories, where he laid down not just his career, but a lifetime's loneliness. After that day, Reggie returned to California. His apartment was large, luxurious, but so empty that the sound of the fridge closing echoed like a sigh. No laughter, no voices, just the steady tick of a clock on the wall. The light of his glory years had left his eyes. People said he had it all: fame, wealth, status, but only he knew what he was losing: a place to belong. The one thread tying him to the world was Kimberly, his daughter from a brief but profound romance. In those quiet years, her voice calling Dad over the phone softened his heart. He recalled, "Just hearing her laugh reminds me there's still a reason to stay." Sometimes he visited Kimberly, walking with her along Santa Monica's shore, talking about music and movies, avoiding baseball. "She doesn't need to understand baseball," he once said, "just that her dad tried to make her proud." Years later, in the 2023 documentary Reggie, he confessed in a low, slow voice, "I have everything, except someone to share it with." The words cut through his aura like a knife. To the public, he was still tough, smiling brightly for cameras, but behind the lens, he was a man who'd gone too far with no one left to call him by his real name. That Hall of Fame night, after everyone had gone, he sat alone in a small hotel room, opened his suitcase, and pulled out an old photo of his father. He set it on the table, poured a glass of whiskey, and raised it like a toast after a win. The yellow lamplight caught the tears on his aged face. "Dad, I made it," he whispered, "but I don't know what for anymore." Then he gave a faint smile, the smile of a man who'd won the world but lost himself. Outside the window, Cooperstown's night sank into stillness. A light breeze stirred flags, flown at half-mast, banners of honor swaying gently, and in the midst of it all, the man America called Mr. October sat quietly, staring at his father's photo, letting tears fall silently. In the dim light, his face reflected in the glass, older, warier, but still holding a gentle glow, the kind only those who've lost so much can keep. That night, Reggie Jackson wasn't the legend of October. He was just a son, sitting with his father's memory, smiling faintly in the dark. In 2005, a sweltering afternoon in Tampa, Florida, Reggie Jackson drove his glossy black SUV along the coastal road, windows down, the wind carrying the scent of salt and late-day heat. He had just left a charity event, feeling light-hearted, unaware that in minutes his life would shift again. From behind, a car barreled toward him at a reckless speed, no lights, no brakes. The impact roared like thunder. Reggie's SUV spun, then flipped. 1, 2, 3 rolls. Glass shattered, metal crumpled, screams rang out, and then fell silent. In the fleeting moment between life and death, he only remembered a blinding light flashing before his eyes, not from the sun, but as if from another world. "I saw the light," he later said, voice hoarse, "and I thought, God tapped me on the shoulder." When he woke, everything was white. Hospital ceiling, clear plastic curtain, lights glaring painfully. His body ached, his back felt numb, as if it no longer belonged to him. Beside him, the heart monitor beeped steadily, a sound both cold and comforting. He tried to lift his head, but his neck stiffened. Each breath cut like a knife in his chest. Blood in his eyes blurred his vision. He saw nurses rushing by, IV drips, tubes, and his own shadow on the wall, a frail, weary figure, nothing like the Mr. October who once stood atop glory. His voice rasped, almost a whisper, "I thought nothing could knock me down. I was wrong." The days that followed were a long string of pain. His body was battered, his back severely injured, doctors fearing he might lose mobility. He lay there, immobile, hearing the doctor's shoes echo in the hallway, the storm outside battering the windows. No one was by his side except rotating nurses. Each time he woke, he saw the water cup, the clock on the wall, and the truth that time moved on while he lay still. In the long nights, he thought of his parents, the Hall of Fame, the houses that burned, the bullet that once grazed his face, all the times he cheated death, as if life was testing how much he could endure. Then one evening, when the pain briefly eased, Reggie asked a nurse for a pen and paper. His hand trembled, the writing scrolled, but each stroke carried the breath of awakening. On the blank page, he wrote the first lines, "Mr. October Foundation, for kids who aren't seen, for those who don't get the chances I had." In pain, he found the meaning of survival. The physical therapy days that followed were another battle. He learned to walk with crutches, each step shaky, like a toddler's first. Sometimes he fell hard, sweat mixing with tears, but he didn't quit. "I can't let this fall define me," he told the doctor quietly. "I've lost plenty, but I always get up. It's the only thing I know how to do." His body recovered slowly, but his soul shone clearer than ever. Each morning, as the first sunlight spilled into the room, he opened his eyes, took a deep breath, something so simple yet suddenly precious. When discharged, he walked slowly down the long hospital corridor, still clutching crutches, but carrying a new strength within, not of muscle, but of gratitude. Back home, he stood before the mirror for a long time. His face was gaunt, a small scar on his temple, eyes deeper, weighed by sleepless nights. But in that gaze was something new, calm. He was no longer chasing spotlights. Now he just wanted to live slowly enough to feel his breath, hear the ocean, call his daughter, without needing a special occasion. One night, as rain pattered against the windows, he sat writing in a notebook, simple but honest lines. I survived. That means I owe life something. Under the dim glow of a desk lamp, his handwriting wavered, but each stroke held the quiet strength of a man who'd been through fire, bullets, loss, loneliness, and still gave thanks for breathing. The next morning, he stepped onto the balcony. Florida's dawn rose, sunlight glinting off the sea like a giant mirror. He squinted at the horizon, where the sun emerged amid fiery clouds. In that moment, Reggie Jackson, the man whose name once echoed across the world, stood silently, one hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat. It still pulsed, slow but steadfast, and he smiled, not the smile of victory, but of someone who understood the real miracle wasn't in home runs, but in waking to see the light again. In the 2010s, as most peers faded from the spotlight, Reggie Jackson chose the opposite path, not back to the field, but to humanity. He founded the Mr. October Foundation, a small but resolute organization supporting Black and underprivileged youth in accessing STEM education, science, technology, engineering and math. No bat, no roaring stands. Reggie now stood in cramped classrooms, surrounded by kids with glasses, holding robot parts, eyes sparkling. When they called Mr. October, he gave a gentle smile, his calloused hand resting lightly on their shoulders as encouragement. "You may not hit a ball well," he said, "but you can build something that makes the world listen." That's how he traded home runs for hope, stadium lights for the gaze of a new generation. From 2021 to 2024, he served as a special advisor for the Houston Astros. In his 70s, Reggie still walked onto the practice field each morning, cap low, steps slow but eyes sharp. He taught young players not just how to grip a bat, but how to stand firm when life threw cruel pitches. "When people hate you, don't answer with hate," he said, "answer with results." On scorching Houston afternoons, he was often seen alone by the fence, watching the young men train, as if seeing himself from half a century ago. Once a young player asked, "Do you ever regret anything?" He just smiled, voice low, "Without the scars, I wouldn't know how to heal anyone else." Then, in June 2024, fate brought him back to where his wounds began. Rickwood Field, Birmingham, Alabama, America's oldest ballpark, once a sacred ground for the Negro Leagues, and a place where he'd faced humiliation for his skin color. National television broadcast live. Thousands, every age, every race, fell silent as Reggie stepped onto the stage. He held the microphone, voice trembling slightly, eyes scanning the stands as if searching for his younger self. Then he spoke. "Over 50 years ago," he began, "I came to Birmingham with my team. I was a 19-year-old kid, full of dreams. I walked into a restaurant for lunch, and they pointed at me, said I couldn't eat there." His voice caught, hands gripping the mic tightly. "I remember standing still, staring at the ground. I didn't know whether to be angry, ashamed, or walk away. I just know my heart hurt so much it wanted to break." The crowd was silent, only the wind whistled through Rickwood's grass, the wind that once carried the smell of tobacco, old paint, history, and tears. 50 years had passed, but as he spoke, you could hear the pain that never left. A reporter wrote, his voice shook, but his eyes burned like fire. Then he took a deep breath, looked straight into the camera, and said clearly, "I forgive, but I won't forget." In that moment, the stadium held its breath. Thousands stood, some elderly white men wiped tears, young black kids hugged each other. A man once rejected stood on a national stage, not to demand justice, but to teach America to face its past without holding hate. After the ceremony, Reggie left the field slowly. No cameras followed, just the long shadow of dusk. He stepped out of Rickwood's gate, turned for one last look, and bowed his head, as if to his younger self. On his lips, a sad but relieved smile, as if he'd finally said what he'd needed to for over half a century. Days later, he returned to Malibu. His home faced the Pacific, sea breeze carrying salt and memories. On the porch, he sat in a wooden chair, tea cooling, eyes tracing the setting sun. When a reporter came, he didn't say much, just gazed out and sighed. "I carried that wound my whole life. Now I just want it to be a lesson in endurance, forgiveness, in surviving without letting hate burn the soul." He knew he couldn't change the past, but he could ease someone else's future. On the table, beside the tea, was a small plaque with carved words, "Forgive, but remember, because history forgotten will return." As night fell, the house glowed with warm yellow light. Through the window, you could see Reggie writing notes for a new STEM scholarship program. His hand still trembled slightly, but each stroke was firm, unwavering. Beyond, the waves crashed steadily, reflecting pale moonlight. In that quiet space, he smiled faintly, not a victor's smile, but that of a soul finally at peace with its wounds. The scars on his body had long healed, but in his soul, the marks of Rickwood, of discrimination, of loneliness remained, not painful, just quiet. And in that quiet, Reggie Jackson, nearing 80, became what every legend must in the end, not just a survivor, but a forgiver. In 2025, Reggie Jackson turned 79. Dawn in Malibu rose as always, gentle and slightly salty. In his small home overlooking the Pacific, he woke before the sun touched the horizon. Early light slipped through white curtains, reflecting off faded photos lining the walls. Reggie in a Yankees uniform, shaking hands with teammates, holding a World Series trophy, smiling amid crowds. Now the man sat quietly in an armchair, hands trembling with reading glasses, flipping through Mr. October Foundation documents. On the table was a stack of the latest scholarship files, names of black students from the Bronx, Harlem, Houston, Chicago, needing STEM support. He read each name slowly, like a prayer. The small print blurred in his eyes, forcing him to pause, remove his glasses, rub his forehead. His vision had weakened, his back ached constantly, his heart beat irregularly, but his spirit shone remarkably. In the quiet room, his breathing mingled with the distant rhythm of ocean waves. Each morning, Reggie kept his Pilates routine, movements slow, cautious, sometimes halting from back pain, but he never skipped a session. Beside the mat was an old photo with teammates, Catfish Hunter, Thurman Munson, Gene Tenace, faces now gone. Each time he looked at them, he nodded slightly, as if talking to departed friends. "We're still here," he said softly, just quieter on this side. Breakfast was simple: oatmeal, fruit, a little green tea. He'd long given up beer, red meat and sugar, not from fear of death, but to live more clearly, to finish what he'd started. On the fridge, a handwritten note: "Eating well honors the body that carried me this far." At noon, Reggie went to the Foundation's office. No longer moving swiftly, he gripped the railing on steps. But when he opened the door to young staff greeting, "Good morning, Mr. October," he gave a warm smile. They updated him on new projects: a science lab in the Bronx, a coding class in Oakland, a vocational center in Detroit. His eyes lit up like the stadium lights of old. "We'll build another classroom," he said, "where kids never thought they could dream." In the afternoon, he drove slowly along the coastal highway to a small Bronx high school, where his foundation had just completed a new lab. As he entered, cheers erupted. "Mr. October." Kids rushed to him, shouting as if he'd hit another home run. Reggie laughed, raised a hand in greeting, his heart warming. That moment, that sound, brought back the Bronx night of 1977, the same chants, the same fervor, but now not for a hit, but for a life shared. He bent down, signed caps, and told the kids, "Back then I hit balls to hear my name called. Now I want you to call your own, with pride." Those trips tired him quickly. At home, Reggie often sat on the porch, listening to the sea and talking to the past. He spoke of his parents, his daughter Kimberly, who called every night just to say, "I love you, Dad." In the fading daylight, he looked at peace, but his eyes, clouded now, gazed far off. One early autumn day, he called his lawyer to discuss his will. He wanted most of his estate, houses, cars, baseball memorabilia, given to the Education Foundation. "I don't need a big grave or statue," he said slowly. "I want black kids to play, learn, live. If I leave anything, let it be opportunity." The lawyer looked up, saw him smile, a smile no longer sharp like an athlete's, but kind, from someone who'd learned life's worth. That afternoon, he returned to the Oakland Coliseum, the old ballpark where his name echoed through the 1970s. The stands were empty, just wind, and a few autumn leaves swirling. He sat alone, holding a weathered cap, eyes on the deep green field. There he'd stood under lights, heard 50,000 voices roar, felt power surge through him. Now only silence. But in that silence was another beauty, the beauty of acceptance. A cold breeze brushed his jacket. Reggie hunched slightly. He thought of all he'd been through. Fires, bullets, homes turned to ash, people lost, loneliness carved deep. He told himself, without bitterness or complaint, like reading a thick diary. Fire took my homes, he said softly. Bullets nearly took my life. Loneliness stole my heart. But I stood tall, and I gave America something greater than glory, courage to forgive. The sun sank, October light bathing the field in warm orange. Golden leaves fell lightly onto the seat, brushing his aged hand. Reggie closed his eyes, hearing the wind carry the scent of earth, grass, the smell of youth, victory. Things passed. In that moment, he was no legend, no loner, just a whole man who'd paid his debt to life. As night fell, moonlight glinted off a small sign outside the Foundation's office, Mr. October Foundation, turning pain into purpose. Beneath it a small lamp glowed, shining onto the misty sea. Somewhere in the seaside house, Reggie Jackson sat by the window, back bent, holding a tea mug, looking at that light and smiling. Tomorrow, he might be weaker, walk slower, but that light would remain. The light of kids learning, new dreams born from old ashes. The October light, Reggie Jackson spent his life chasing, holding, passing it on, still burned. And in that light, you saw not just a baseball legend, but a man who turned pain into kindness, memory into forgiveness, and his life into a gentle message for America. Don't forget the past, but let it teach you to love. This story's sorrow isn't from a tragic end, but from the quiet cost of a resilient life. Reggie Jackson, hailed as Mr. October for 563 home runs, and the three-homer night in Game 6 1977, in the Bronx carried unhealed shadows behind the fireworks. 3 fires 1976, losing rings and MVP trophy, 1988, vintage car collection burned, 1991, Oakland Hills firestorm, turning keepsakes to ash. A 1980 New York night with 3 bullets grazing his face amid shattered glass and gunpowder. A 2005 Tampa SUV crash, flipping 3 times where he whispered, "I saw the light, like God tapped my shoulder," then relearned to walk with crutches. We ache for him at the 1993 Hall of Fame 93.6% vote, staring at the empty seat meant for his father, where a son belatedly wished Dad could see me in Cooperstown. We respect him at Rickwood Field in 2024, microphone trembling but eyes ablaze, recounting, "They pointed and said I couldn't eat there," then choosing to tell America, "I forgive, but I won't forget." And we're grateful he didn't retreat in old age. Mornings of Pilates, aching back, fading eyes, photos of lost teammates, but went to Bronx STEM classes, heard kids shout Mr. October, signed his will for black kids to play, learn, live. The lesson for Americans isn't just to praise grit, but to turn pain into purpose, use memory to heal, not hate, invest in education, not monuments, choose forgiveness with remembrance, not cold oblivion. In a nation valuing opportunity and responsibility, Reggie reminds us greatness isn't in applause, but in passing light forward, even when surrounded by darkness. If Reggie Jackson's story of turning pain into light and leaving a legacy of forgiveness touches you, please subscribe to join us in honoring America's great hearts. Thank you for being here. See you in the next video, where we'll share more stories of people, resilience and light enduring through darkness.